Well, thank you so much, Sami, for being here. And
It is my honor. Thank you for the invitation.
I am going to start introducing you, and then we can keep on with the conversation. Sami Awad is a Palestinian non-violence activist and co-director of Non-Violence International. He was the founder and the former executive director of Holy Land Trust in Bethlehem. Sami was born in the United States to Palestinian parents. His father, originally from Jerusalem, became a refugee at the age of 9 after his father was killed in 1948. War, leaving behind his wife and 7 children. Sami's mother is from the Gaza Strip, where he still has members of his family living there. Growing up in a violent situation at a young age, Sami was influenced by the teaching of his uncle Mubarak Awad, the Palestinian activist who promoted and engaged in nonviolent resistance to the occupation during the First Intifada. So, me and Sami met each other, I think it was a year ago, here in Brazil, at the Defend the Sacred gathering in São Paulo.
2 years, I think, by now.
2 years. Yeah, maybe
2
that's,
years.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
And that was held by the Favela da Paz Institute, coordinated by Claudinho Miranda, Ellen Fernandes, Agatha Liz, Rafael Poesia, and all that amazing people that are guarding an amazing project and space and culture based on love, on reciprocity, solidarity, in the outskirts of São Paulo, in Jardim Ângela. And it was amazing to be there, meeting all that amazing people from all over the world. And me and Sami connected in a beautiful place. And we're still in touch, and we're here now. So
Yes.
Sam can share a little bit of his life story, and yeah, I think I would like to hand over to you, asking how did it all start, and yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for this beautiful connection, for the heart that you bring into spaces, for the love that you are. It was my first time to Brazil, and it was such a profound experience to be at the favela and then to be in the Amazon and to be, it was amazing people, truly amazing people. That was one of a highlight of my life, to be on that trip with Defend the Sacred. Yeah, so for me, my story, I guess like many people, began before they were born. Uh, I am a Palestinian, and I come from a Palestinian family that my father's side lived in Jerusalem, was born in Jerusalem, and lived in Jerusalem when he was born. And my mother, as you mentioned before, is from Gaza, from the Gaza Strip, where, as many of our viewers know, that there is a very violent and brutal attack on the people of Gaza happening right now. 1948 is a turning point in the history of this land, when the Jews declared a state called Israel, and the Palestinians experienced what we call the Nakba, the catastrophe. It was a campaign to try to ethnically cleanse us from this land as the peoples of this land, where 75% of the population became refugees, of the Palestinian population. The person who would have been my grandfather was killed in the war, leaving behind 7 children and his wife, my grandmother. The oldest child was 12 and the youngest was 2. And the children actually buried the father in the courtyard of the house. A few days later, the Jewish forces came to that neighborhood and kicked out all the non-Jews from that neighborhood. And when I say kicked out all the non-Jews, I think it's very, very important for us to know that in our history, This is something that we don't talk about much, but we should talk about more. This land was a land where Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived together as good neighbors. My father, he's 85 years old, and he still remembers the name of the Jewish children he used to play with when he was 9 years old, living in that neighborhood. And so for us, it's very important to say this is not a religious war between Jews and Muslims, or Jews, Christians, and Muslims fighting over the land. This land is holy to all three religions. It is ideologies that wanted exclusivity to this land. That was the problem that I'll talk about more. My story, I mentioned the story because who I have become, who the family became, is because of my grandmother. My grandmother was a woman that always insisted to her children and us as grandchildren that with everything that we faced, losing her husband, losing her home, losing her property, losing all of her belongings, and becoming a refugee with nothing, she always insisted that as a family, we will never seek revenge and retaliation for what happened to us. That revenge was not going to take us anywhere. It was not going to bring her husband back, and it will not bring us our land back, our home back. At the same time, she also always insisted that as a family, we will not be silent in the face of injustice and violence, that we will proactively seek peace and reconciliation with those who did this to us. And then for me, she is a model of the pure strength of the feminine energy of a woman who lost everything and still said, in strength, we make peace with those who did this to us. This was how she defined justice, actually, because many people define justice as retaliation, getting back what we lost, making them pay for what they did to us. For her, justice was the process of seeking peace with those who did this to us. That was the seed that she planted in us as a family. I grew up in that understanding of peace and reconciliation. At the same time, I grew up as a Palestinian living under the military occupation. Every day of my life witnessing Israeli soldiers with machine guns, Israeli Jewish settlers who were very violent towards us. And for me, it was very challenging as a child, trying to connect two narratives. One narrative tells me seek peace and reconciliation with them, and the other narrative says, but they don't want to make peace with us. They are violent towards us. They hate us. I have the right to resist them. I have the right to survive. And that challenge of the narratives was answered when I was 12 years old, when an uncle of mine that you mentioned, Mubarak, opened a center called the Palestinian Center for the Study of Nonviolence to teach Palestinians and to work with Israelis to join together to nonviolently resist the injustice, the occupation, and bring freedom and peace to both peoples in this land. My first demonstration that I was in when I was 12 years old, it was a demonstration to plant olive trees in a land that was threatened to be confiscated by the Israeli military and settlers. And I remember in that incident where I planted the tree, and then an Israeli soldier came actually and pulled the tree from the ground and threw it on some rocks. And my first reaction was not to run away, was not to cry, was not to run to my uncle and complain, was to grab the tree and put it back in the land and cover it. And that gave me such a sense of empowerment that that changed my life. I began to understand nonviolence, because nonviolence is not just about the action, it is about also the inner strength that you have to say, I can do something in the midst of what is impossible. I can resist, I can engage in steadfastness, I can be resilient. I don't have to become a victim, even if the other side wants me to become a victim. So I grew up with that energy of nonviolent resistance and activism. My uncle at one point was arrested and deported by the Israelis. He's still not allowed to come and live here. The Israelis accused him of being a threat to the national security of Israel. A non-violent activist was seen as a threat. And his deportation made me commit my life to nonviolence. I said, I want to spend my life understanding why would a nation so strong, so powerful, see in a nonviolent activist a threat and get rid of him. Jumping after my education in this field, in 1998, I started an organization called Holy Land Trust, which is this recognition that this is the Holy Land. Before Palestine, before Israel, before all the terms that we give it, this is Holy Land. This is, for these religions, it's sacred land, and then we need to treat it as that. We need to be trustees of this land. This is why Holy Land Trust, we don't own the land. We don't, the land doesn't belong to us. We belong to the land, as we know so well from indigenous teachings. And this is what this land is about. We belong to it. We belong to its beauty. As we were starting the work we were doing, there was a peace process actually happening at that time. It was called the Oslo peace process, and the whole peace process collapsed. And it became a very, very violent situation known as the Second Intifada. Both sides were violent. And for me, as an organization, we went into the commitment of nonviolence, stronger and stronger, fully believing in nonviolent resistance and nonviolent activism. We became a leading organization in the work of nonviolence. But I would say at a certain point, I had sort of also a spiritual awakening where I began to also realize that at some point my engagement in nonviolence was coming also from a place of hatred towards the other. And for me, one of the greatest Jewish shamans who walked on this land, a guy named Jesus 2000 years ago, was teaching his followers to love their enemy. And for me, I went into a deep journey to understand, what does it mean to love the enemy? What does it mean to love somebody that hates you? He didn't say make peace with your enemy. He didn't say negotiate a treaty with your enemy. He said love your enemy. And for me, I took this on as my spiritual practice to find out what it means to love the enemy. And in that, I discovered that, yes, we have the right and responsibility to resist injustice, but also to begin to see what makes the oppressor an oppressor. What makes a person who wants to commit violence choose to do these things. And one of the key things that we discovered, not the only thing for sure, but one key thing is to begin to understand the effect of trauma and fear on people, on nations, on individuals, how trauma, when it is not addressed, when it is not healed, can become very toxic and can create violent situations, because then trauma connects with fear. And when there is fear, I want to protect, and especially I want to protect myself from having the trauma experience happen to me again. And therefore, I will suppress others. I will marginalize others. I will build walls between me and others. I will not trust others because I need to take care of my own. And I think this is what we're seeing playing out continuously in this land, how fear and trauma in both Palestinian and Israeli communities that is not healed, that fear that our existence is going to end if we don't protect ourselves. This has been the motivation. Even peace activists are motivated by fear. And I think this is something that we need to change. So for me, in addition to nonviolence work, I began to engage in the healing work and understanding that deep collective trauma healing work needs to happen as we also move in nonviolent resistance and as we also create a vision for the future. We cannot have a vision from the future that is motivated by our past experience. Somebody who is traumatized cannot have a clear vision of the future. That vision will only be about security. So we need to create a vision that is independent from the trauma, honoring it, respecting it, but putting it where it belongs, and to say, yes, we could learn from the past, but we cannot be motivated by the past. So this is, I'm sorry, maybe I took too long, but this is a summary of of my journey in this process.
I heard this weekend someone saying that you cannot drag someone to be healed. The person needs to engage in that, to want that. And how do you see that as possible in a world where, all these horrible things are being inflicted upon Palestinians? Like, how do we create this field where people can engage in this deeper work and realize that we all need healing? No one is healed. Like, we are in the midst of this very wounded world. So how can we engage to create this field, and how do we connect to people to get into that?
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. And I was also touched by that statement as well. I have been thinking about it uh, since then, because you cannot force somebody to choose healing. Somebody needs to feel in a deep need for healing to happen. I think part of the work that we've done has been it's been a blessing to have connections as an activist with many Israeli activists as well, who understand the importance of the healing work that needs to happen in their society. Because what many Israelis are beginning to see is that their own society, their own structure, uh, is their own culture even is being hijacked by an ideology that is going to hurt them at the end of the day, not just the Palestinians. Before October 7th happened, many Israelis, thousands, tens of thousands, were protesting on the streets, calling their government fascist. They were beginning to see the rise of fascism in their own society towards them, not just towards the Palestinians. And that system of fascism speaks as if they are the spokespeople of Judaism, the spokespeople of all Israelis. They've completely hijacked that identity. And so I think there was, and there has been for some time now, an awakening within many Israeli groups, individuals, to say that we need to also look into who we are as Jews. What made us who we are? What made us reach this level of claiming victimization, but also being so brutal and so violent towards other, and not to allow this to happen in our name again. And so for us, we've been inviting, and they've been coming, Israelis, to engage in this healing work of understanding, at least, how we are motivated by our collective trauma and our pain. Now, of course, this is not something that we're doing in mass scale with hundreds and thousands of people. We wish we could do that. But I think part of the work that we do is this transformative work that needs to take steps, and we need to build the groundwork for it. It might not happen in my lifetime, it might not happen in my children's lifetime, but we know that these seeds that we are planting are very important for future generations. And we know, again, from indigenous teachings, that everything we do is for generations to come ahead after us, not for our time as well. Of course, there are those who reject this work, who don't want healing, who understand that. And but I think ultimately these people will either wake up or will feel the pain of it. Because if you're not healed, then that, like any infection, if you don't heal it, it becomes toxic, it becomes a really bad infection, and it will really hurt you more. So my wish and my hope is for the Jewish community, for the Palestinian, for all of us to wake up one day and say, yeah, we are traumatized, and we need to engage in the deep healing work within our own society and between our communities.
Yeah, I think this kind of understanding allows us to see that it's not going to be a new political solution or a social theory that is going to help us to go through this. Like, there is something deeper, and that is even hard to put into words because it's it touches on things that are unconscious. And I think we are on a time as well of, you know, reigniting these ancient ways where rituals were part of a collective life and that we lost in the modern, way of living
Mm.
in urban centers and all that. And and I think in rituals there is something that we touch that is the transcendent. There is something that goes beyond our logical understanding, and there is a real medicine in that. Like it's a technology. It's an ancient technology of transformation of energy that really shift our awareness, our understanding. And I would like to listen to you a bit more on this topic of what is the role of rituals and what it can bring to us, and especially into peace activism.
Definitely. Like everything you said, I fully agree with. So my answer came through you as well. Well, one thing that we see happening in this sort of liberal system of capitalism and patriarchy is there is a lot of focus on individualism. And it's about my journey, it's about my process, it's about my boundaries, it's about my work, it's about my experience, it's about my protection. So there's a lot of pressure put on the individual. And that for me is creating not just collapse of societies, but collapse of the individual themselves, the individual human being that has to take on now so much responsibility for survival as a species on this planet. My survival depends solely on me doing the work now. This is what the capitalist system has infused in us for many years now. And I agree with you now. There's that system is beginning to collapse. The edges are beginning to fall apart, and people are beginning to understand that we as humans are actually communal beings. Our DNA structure is meant for community. It's not even meant for the nucleus family. It's meant for community. It's not even just father, mother, and children. It is the community. This is what I belong to. This is who I am. It's the tribe. And the tribe comes together in ceremony, comes together in ritual, in celebration, in mourning, in grieving together, in making decisions in the collective where every voice is heard. I celebrate when I go to visit tribes in Asia or Africa, and I see the children sitting in council as much as the adults sharing their view and their opinion on decisions that need to be made in the collective. And there is healing in that. There is space where I, as a person, I know that if I need something, I have a community around me to support me. That if I, just like in the Maori tradition, when I went to New Zealand, that the term they use is if they are on balance or off balance. That if I go off balance, there is some people to help me get on balance. It's not even about right and wrong, committed a felony or not. It's about this person has gone off balance, and the community itself brings them and decides how can we help this person return to balance. This is what tribalism is about, and ceremonies are key. Ceremonies connect people together. Ceremonies create a space for shared understanding together. Ceremonies are a point of strength for that community and for that society, and uh, and also to understand different roles and responsibilities where I don't have to do everything as an individual. I have my role, I have the things that I feel close to connected to doing, and there are other people that are doing something else. And ceremony in itself, like you said, it shifts also to a higher consciousness, higher connection, higher understanding that there is something also beyond me and my community at the spiritual level, at the level of the greater consciousness that we connect with and understand that there is learning from there as well. And that humbles us as a group of people, that makes us also really see ourselves in who we are as humans. in the beauty of who we are and also in the insignificance of who we are, which is also very beautiful and appreciated in the realm of this amazing universe that we live in. And especially when you bring medicine into these spaces and these ceremonies, for me, the process of deep healing work that happens is so amazing and so powerful and so profound. And medicine connects people together because the plants are meant to connect. If it's the roots, if it's the psilocybin, if it's whatever it is within these plants, they are meant to connect to bring people together. So we come together in ceremony in the fullness of being one in such spaces and building deep relationships of mutual trust and respect that makes us be able to evolve and grow further and further as a group and community.
I would like to ask you to share a little bit of what you've been doing there in Palestine with the sacred plants, and when did it started, and what you see as an outcome from this work.
Yeah, the way it started, I have to be honest, it was sort of like this, I call it like an intentional mistake. There was intention in it and it was a mistake at the same time. For me, it was a mistake, and for the greater forces, there was an invitation. So I was actually in Colombia with a community that, you know, hosted Defend the Sacred called Tamera. And we were doing support work. I was doing nonviolence training for San Jose de Apartado in the north of Colombia, an amazing community that has stood strong in nonviolent activism and refused to align with any of the warring factions, but to say we are here and we want to protect our right to exist here. And it's not about being with anybody. And they get attacked by everybody. So we went there in solidarity with them. And as we were in Colombia, somebody comes, we were actually in Bogota at first, somebody comes to the hostel and says, who wants to participate in an ayahuasca ceremony? An ayahuasca indigenous ceremony. Like for me, the word hallucinations, I did not know. The word psychedelics, I did not know. Ayahuasca, I did not know. Magic mushrooms, I did not know none of these things. I grew up in a very Christian family, so anything.
When was that? When you were in Colombia?
This was maybe 15 years ago, so it's not like you started very young. I started quite old in my journey. I actually thought it was like one of those, you know, you pay $50, you go to a ritual, there's dinner and there's music and some indigenous dancing, and then you go back home. That was it. So yeah, we got on the bus, driving for hours deep into the jungle. We go into this place where this big maloca and people and dancing and movement. And I end up having my first experience with plant medicines that first night. Until then, I didn't have any experience before that because for me, growing up in a structure and system that said this is a sin, you don't do these things. And after that experience, I began to see why that system doesn't want us to do these things because that system wants to maintain fear and control over us. Even the best understanding of religion is still embedded in some level of fear and control by the establishment. And that was my first experience. I came back to Palestine, nobody to talk to about it. So I ignored it. It was just an experience that I had, and I went on with my life. And a few years later, like 4 years later, an Israeli couple called me and said, there's a project we want to talk to you about. And I met with them. And as we were talking, I hadn't talked to anybody about plant medicine. The man looks at me in the eyes and says, have you done medicine before? I did not go to Tylenol and you know all the drugs. Like when he said medicine, have you done medicine before? I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I said, I've done ayahuasca. And he said, this is why we're here. The medicine has brought us together. And yeah, and from then we began to explore and research. And for me, it became very clear, even though like it goes against religious teachings and things. As I said, I began to understand why the institutions make these things as illegal and make these things as sin, because there's a level of freedom and openness and understanding and awareness that not many people experience. I think actually all the prophets have done plant medicines at some point or another. That's why they were able to see those amazing visions and get those amazing teachings. So we began to work, and what's very important is to acknowledge that our work was also parallel with a lot of scientific research that is happening on the effects of these medicines on consciousness, on trauma, on anxiety, on depression, on addiction, that there is amazing, amazing results happening in the research department on the scientific level. Of course, the indigenous communities knew that for thousands of years. They didn't need the scientists to confirm that to them, but we still live in that Western mindset where we need some sort of proof, scientific proof for it. And we started exploring because of my interest in collective trauma work to bring these medicines together in spaces that are contained, that are held, that are very well prepared for, and very well integrated after with very specific people that also meeting the right criteria and requirements and the commitment that people have to say, yes, I want to be in a healing journey. And so we started doing this. It led us also to 3 years ago to do a very big project in Spain where we took Palestinians and Israelis to drink the plant medicine, to be with grandmother together in ceremony. And the results were amazing, more than what we expected. Maybe they were too amazing that it was very difficult for people to actually land back in the physical surroundings of their families and communities and in this conflict after they came back, because they really experienced what peace looks like when there is no fear of the other, what peace looks like when we are connected in oneness as a human family, and where we honor and celebrate the cultures and the identities that we have and not see them as a threat to who I am. And so, yeah, I believe that there is a lot of knowledge and learning that comes from the plant medicines. And I believe that if there is a God out there and gods out there and spirits out there, there is a reason why these plant medicines exist on this planet. And they have provided them for us, not to reject them and not to fear them, but to actually be connected with them. So this is sort of my new theology and my approach. And I know many Christians from my tribe don't like to hear this, and it's okay. Like for me, I still honor them and love them as well.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I think they are coming with so much power now. I mean, the ayahuasca is from the Amazon, right? It's a plant from the Amazon, and now it's all over the world, and the indigenous people are being called to go and to share this ancestral knowledge and healing. And and I see as also an awakening from the earth trying to talk to us, and it's a straight connection, when we experience it. It's not that it's like, oh, we are enlightened and we're it's not about it. It's you see how much you still have to learn. And I think this humility give us the openness to the other, to the earth, to awaken this sensitivity to listen to a more greater um, talk that is available and that can guide us through, because the only way is through, like there's no other way.
Bringing to death our ego, I think, is one of the biggest explorations and celebrations of being with the plant medicine. When the ego dies, and then I fully surrender in humbleness, like you said, to whatever is to come with me. And so this, yeah, for me, it's such a key component of it, to lose the self for something much more greater and much more profound than the me. that there's the us, and the us is everything, everything, everything.
Yeah. And I remember when you said last time we spoke, and I was asking you how the things were, how were people there, how were they relating to each other, and you said I can see that the people that had been engaging in this kind of healing work are more committed to this deep peace work of like really seeing each other as humans and not as like, all these identities
Yeah.
that we masters.
Exactly. What happens in times of great violence in societies, most, not all, but most peace activists fall into their narrative of their nation, of their tribe. So even though they were engaging in peace, but when my people are being attacked, I become part of my people and defend my people and begin to verbally attack the other for what they're doing on both sides. The peace camp disappears in a way, or yeah, loses its strength because now I have to stand with my against. We go into the for and against. The people that I've seen go deep in the plant medicine work, and I would say intentionally with the desire to collective healing work that is within them, of course. Collective healing is an idea. What really happens is in the individual, I begin to heal my understanding of my identity, and I begin to hear my understanding of the other. And so this is the collective work that it's a very personal process, of course, that happens. Those people that engaged with this intentionally, I have seen them fully understand where we are, have full awareness of how we are being led and manipulated by the establishment to fall into fear and victimization and choose not to. So this is the power of the medicine, for me, the healing that happened. So that group of people has been more connected, more aware, more engaging, refusing to go into victimization, taking responsibility than anything I've seen before. There are many people that do plant medicines, but once you bring that intention and go in a process, it's a different experience because many people, sadly, who have done plant medicine for hundreds of years have also fallen into the narrative of their nation because most of their work was maybe on the personal work, or maybe it was more about being in these spaces for the recreational or celebration aspect of it, but not in the deep work. And so for me, it's a very specific invitation to say that not everybody who does plant medicine, even though they might say they're healing, it's the question of when we say like when push comes to shove, when you are in the situation of stress, does your insight from your experience come out, or do you suppress it and you go into your fear and trauma body? So for me, it's a beautiful test, and it's an amazing experience to see that yes, people who take this deep commitment are different.
Yeah, you said something very important about the intention and because that's what sets the space, right? And that's what, guides the work. And yeah, wow, that's a lot. And yeah, I appreciate everything you've been doing there. And it reminds me of that in the 60s and the 70s and all this renaissance, well, the start of the LSD and all that, and when the United States government realized that all the militaries were, standing up and say, no, this is, it has nothing to do with me. So that's when they started suppressing everything, and now there is a boom again, and we're awakening to this possibility of, rejoining us as a human family, but still so much work to do and so much separation still going on.
So much work to do, and for me, I think to also make it to make this point that at this time we need indigenous wisdom more than anything. The fact that a lot of these medicines are being taken over by the Western corporate system, capitalizing on it, seeing how they could make money from it. It is so, so important for the indigenous communities and for us who are connected with them to really make sure that these communities are in power, in decision making, in the clarity, in the yes and the no, because yeah, that system will always try to see how it could benefit. If they cannot, that's if you can't beat them, join them. So, but this is system. If you cannot beat them, then take over. And so for me, I want to encourage us, all of us, especially people who are in the West who might see this or others as we engage in this work, to keep connecting to the roots of the medicine, the people who for thousands of years inherited the wisdom of this medicine, and for none of us to think that, yeah, by going on a month retreat in the Amazon, I have full access to it, or worse, in the pharmaceutical industrial complex, to use this and abuse this for money making. So our fight is not in the spreading of the medicine, but also spreading it in the right, conscious, and correct way as well in the world.
Thank you for saying that, because that's extremely important to be said. And that's what this merge of spirituality and political and social consciousness must come together, because spirituality by itself without this um, enrooted activism and like help to the communities, to the land, it's nothing. It's ego, you know? And as well, like how, and leading to almost the last question, but how do you think and why do you think it is important to infuse our political and social activism with spiritual practices?
As I mentioned to you before, I was engaging in nonviolent activism, thinking I was doing the right thing, and maybe on a practical, technical level, tactical level, I was doing the right thing, being nonviolent. But I understood that my engagement in nonviolence was coming from a heart that was full of hatred, resentment, a heart that wanted the world to see how bad the other side was. That's why I was choosing nonviolence, because when I choose nonviolence, it exposes them for the evilness of who they are.
This is it. When we do that, we are the good ones, right? We're on the good
And
side.
just immediately an ego trip that I'm the good one, they're the bad one, I'm the right, they're the wrong, and not understanding the complexity and the layers that come with who we are. And it's exactly like you said. I think it's very important that we are all on our spiritual path, on our spiritual journey. And for me, spiritual journey is the two words that come when I say spirituality is heart and conscious. It is the ability to be fully aware and conscious and to live my higher self in that consciousness. Not spirituality in terms of connecting to a higher being or a higher creator. My spiritual journey is reaching a point of higher consciousness and also reaching a point of unconditional love. And this is what spirituality is for me, to open my heart fully to loving the other and understanding the other and wanting to build oneness and community with the other. And so for me, this is why we call it sacred activism, bringing that component of sacredness, which is the spiritual component of love and consciousness, into the reality that there is injustice, that there is asymmetry of power, that there is violations of human rights, that there is inequalities, there is racism, there is discrimination, there is a system of patriarchy that creates hierarchy of groups of people over each other that has to be addressed and resisted. But when I come to it from a place of heart and compassion and consciousness, I'm able not just to achieve more, I'm able to also bring fully to an end that cycle and invite people more into that space. For me, one of the greatest modern examples of this is what happened in Standing Rock, for example, on Turtle Island, where the indigenous people whose land was being desecrated, whose water was being threatened, came together and say, yes, we will stand for the rights of water, the rights of land, not just our rights. And so there was this clarity of action and activism and we do it in prayer, and we do it in love, and we do it in understanding. And for me, this is why what they initiated has become a global movement in the Defend the Sacred Alliance and many, many other groups that are taking it on. And so it's exactly like you said, activism without heart is filled with bitterness and hate and will not take me anywhere. Sacredness and spirituality without engaging only means I isolate myself from the world. And for me, that means there is no need. What is the point of engaging in spiritual work without also connecting it with the reality of what we face? Like it's like holding onto the sky, and also my feet are fully grounded at the same time.
Yeah, wow. It requires so much heart. I remember when I had the chance to visit Palestine, and it was right before the pandemic, and I was seeing that, facing that wall, and like very emotional, and seeing the death of humanity, built in that horrible wall. And then I sat down in a little cafe, and there was a guy sitting there, and he saw that I was very emotional, and I said, what what is the way out? And he said, we have to love the Israelis. And I was just like, started to
Mm.
cry, because, for me, that is here in Brazil, with no, threat to violence and all of that. Like, it's like I cannot even touch the amount of, all the
Yeah.
pain that you've all face every day. So yeah, I think the last question, and connecting also to a work of Satish Kumar, who have come recently to Brazil to speak about his new book, Radical Love. And he says, like, we have the moderate love, where we love our families, our colleagues, our, neighbors, but now we need radical love. We need to love the ones we disagree with, the ones who have criticized us, or the ones who we judge. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think the last question here, is that, like, how to sustain these on a daily basis.
Yeah. And it will be an illusion to say that it is possible to stay in it continuously. For me, I live my life as honorable and as realistic as I can. And this is why for me consciousness becomes very important, because the moment that I am not in that space, just to be aware of it and not to be harsh on myself, to know that there is more work that needs to happen, to know that there is pain in me that I've experienced that is also creating different reactions in me. And then to honor it and to say, yes, I continue. I continue. I think to sustain it means to not give up on it, and to see the change and to see the transformation that happens within me. Transformation happens in the sharing of transformation. And so for me, living this transformation, affecting others, influencing others, being an agent where people can witness and see and ask questions to me. And so for me, yes, I continuously seek to live unconditional love, open love, love that is free from fear, free from hatred in my personal and my collective work. But in these moments, I look at myself in the mirror and I smile and I say, "Yeah, Sami, it's okay. You're still a human being on your journey. Don't be tough on yourself. Tomorrow will be a different day. And tomorrow is a different day, for sure." Um, but I think the more we practice it, it's the muscle of the heart, to build that muscle in the heart. The more it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. And this is why we do retreats. This is why we do spaces for healing, even for us who are activists, who've been in this work for many, many years. We need the time to step back and to say, yeah, I need to rest. I'm burned out. I feel drained. I need to get my energy back. And we do that. So yeah, as long as the commitment is there, we could get off track, we'll get back on track, and we'll keep doing it, and we keep doing it. Uh, but but for me, I get back to it very quickly because there is nothing more beautiful than love anyway. even the enemy, when you love the enemy, that means you really understand and have compassion for them. As I said, it does not mean I accept their behavior, but I'm able to make a differentiation between the action and the actor. And I can resist the action, but I can have compassion and love for the actor and knowing that they went through pain, they went through trauma, they have inherited something that needs healing, and that our systems of punishment that exist today, putting people in prison, whatever we're doing, has not helped anything at all. And I think part of what we are talking about is we need to create all kinds of new systems and structures of how the human family comes together, how we deal with challenges, how we deal with violence. Yeah, but love. Love is the greatest force. How can we not be in love and enjoy it and celebrate it when we can and bring it to others?
Thank you, Sami. Thank
Oh,
you. Thank you so much.
such a pleasure. Thank you. Wow.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for inspiring and sharing your deep, deep, deep wisdom and all the work you've been doing. I honor you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very mutual. So much love. Thank you.